I was thinking about a few of the things I said about the self. And you should think of the self as a container, but that dissatisfaction that keeps getting poured or irritation into that container, that is something separate from self. So that distinction is also very helpful. It's just that the self wants to claim ownership of those things. It's sort of a sneaky, sly, automatic thing that it does. See, there is such a thing as anger, but then if you're angry, then it becomes my anger. You possess it. But that's sloppy cognition. It's sloppy, quick, and normal. Because those things are distinct. And that should give you great hope because you should keep them distinct. Like, this is dissatisfaction. If you're experiencing it, don't say it's my dissatisfaction. Just say this is dissatisfying. Or I find, or I notice dissatisfaction within me. Or this appears to be dissatisfaction. Or this appears dissatisfying. Or this is generating dissatisfaction. But dissatisfaction in a third party kind of sense. Again, it's separate. And then by looking at it distinctly, and then also seeing that the self is also optional, that is, it's a vessel, it's a psychological construct that will automatically and normally be in play with egoic kinds of executions in an automatic kind of way, but that's not supernormal. There is the supernormal option, which is to have variability as far as the self goes. Abstractness, you can abstract the self instead of making it more concrete, you make it more abstract. So who would be the person that would be dissatisfied with this, or what type of person? Or what type of self would contain this type of dissatisfaction, and what type of selves or containers can you poke holes in and let that dissatisfaction leak out of? Did anything change without the dissatisfaction or irritability or anger or greed or ignorance or any of the other mind poison? Did anything change? Well, everything got better, but I thought they were all part of the container, but then the container changed, just a few parts of it changed, and now you don't have that poison within you, or it's in the process of being dissipated or alleviated. Yes, it's there, it got poured into the container, but now it's leaking out in a place where it can leak out and go away, and no harm is done. We do not need to drink it. We do not need to rub it around. We do not need to get further agitated. We just focus on the breath. We change our focus, right, from the agitating thing to the breath. The breath is perfectly neutral. In fact, it's even good. Let's take a deep breath. Isn't that good? Look at that. We're able to increase the separation between self and what the self is experiencing, or thinks it's experiencing, or thinks it needs to experience, or was automatically put into motion. Because everyone has buttons that can be pushed, and if they're pushed, there can be that type of reaction. But we don't have to deepen poisons. We can say, okay, this is poison. So it's not me, it's not mine, but this is poison. and it's going to take however long it needs to take to dissipate. Now, some people, like the stubborn horses out there, I've seen people who get angry. They're angry years afterwards. But usually they have to think about the thing, or at least the way they see things, which is usually wrong view. And then that anger just generates, like their faces turn red years later and their bodies cramp up. It's a biophysical reaction. It's as real as it gets. But essentially, that's the power of wrong view, which is not skillful. Now, the opposite of that is right view. Take the right view on something and then just watch people's faces light up as they're filled with joy, as they're filled with bliss, as they're filled with gratitude. And it just keeps getting more and more and more. It just flows in more and more. It's all the good things instead of the bad things. If something bad flows in, maybe down, well, they let that go. Oh, I was waiting for that. You're playing tennis and badminton. What do they call it? Is it a bird, a badminton bird? Flies in. I didn't see that coming, but boom, you can hit it with the tennis racket right out of your way. Hit it back over. You weren't even playing that game, but you just hit it in the direction it came from, swatted it. Was it the shuttle? Something like that, badminton shuttle? Okay. And then it's back to playing your tennis, your enjoyable tennis game. Do back and forth. Here you go. Joy and bliss, gratitude and thankfulness, and universal big picture, and not some type of miserly, vulgar, calm and low view on things. That you left that behind. Forgot about that. You're not coming back to that. It's back to the nice game of tennis. But yeah, the ball is separate from the racket, the court is separate from the ball and the racket, and the self is separate from defilements. And if they happen to get mixed up, if they happen to get jammed up, then it's going to take a while to sort it out. But then right effort is doing that. Saying, wait a second, stop. Taking a time out here, 5 minutes. Let me return to the breath here and sort this out. And I don't have to go back into the good things. I can just revert back to no things. Because no things is better than things that are annoying or misguided or dissatisfying on some level or another. Don't need those things. No siree, Bob. Also not wanting. Greed, like I wish I had 10 things more than what I have now. No. Don't go that far. So don't turn your knowledge of good things into wanting of good things. But if you can think back to some good things, then yeah, do that. Focus on that. That's a lot better than focusing on annoying things. What is in your vicinity? What is in the parameters of your 1 meter monastery? What is in the parameters of your mind? And what needs to be there, what doesn't need to be there, what can you let go, and what can you embrace instead? What right effort can you apply right here, right now? Now, I know some people might find this part controversial, especially because I often talk of political topics or comment on political figures, but if you look at somebody like Bido, like they're trying to hold him up as some type of example of what not to be, in my opinion, but working himself to death into senility. I think during a hybrid war, if you make it to 40, you can retire from worldly things. 40, 45, actually 30, 35, really just depends on how much you've been put through the ringer. But it's really up to you to decide. If you decide to just say, I'm retired, you can do that, and you can turn a corner and you can leave whatever life you were leading, especially if it was really annoying. You can just leave it behind you and start a new life, which does take your spiritual health into account. In fact, it does more than that. It prioritizes it. So like, whereas before you were angry every single day from morning till evening and even while sleeping, which by the way is normal during hybrid war conditions, which we have no matter what the gaslighting contingent cooks up and propagandizes. That's how historians will classify it. So they're not really credible. Are they credible experts? So what do they know about hybrid war if they're the ones denying it even was launched or is happening in the first place? Are those? Is that the doctor you want to consult about your athlete's foot that is there, that they claim isn't there? Are those the experts you need? So this is a tricky business, right? Whereas before, during those horrible times of colonialism, where people, even if they were indentured servants, only had 7 years that they had to devote towards that, and were given some civility, dignity, and respect in exchange. Without those conditions, the assumption that you're just going to work till you die, or you can work till 80 or 100, doing extremely annoying things under extremely annoying conditions, is rather inhumane, wouldn't you say? Like a little strange, it's like a little misguided, it's not really congruent with how things be. If you had, for example, super good hearing protection, you could work in a noisy area like a shop and it wouldn't be a problem. You wouldn't lose your hearing. But if they're firing off, 18th century black powder muskets every day in your vicinity, or the cultural equivalent of that, if you're deaf at 40 and you just can't hear anymore, but they tell you should be okay, then really the problem is on their side. It's not on your side. And like I said, this gaslighting on a psychological, socio-psychological level is really insidious. Like, oh, you're just a whip, or you're too sensitive, or this shouldn't bother you. Those types of people are not helpful. But again, even during non-hybrid war conditions, how old was the Buddha? Because reflecting on his life's pretty good. I think he was in his 30s. So did he retire when he entered the jungle, or did he start working? What did the Padujanos and worldly people say about that in his time? When he did that, did they think it was a good thing he did that? Was he asking for their permission? Did he consult with them first? Or did he do it because that was his destiny? That's what he felt was right effort at that time. Which a lot of people probably thought weren't the right time. Why don't you do it? Just push it off. Just do it. Do it when you're 50 or 60 like everyone else. I can imagine the type of conversations he had to endure. Now, look, if you want to give it a worldly spin, look, the man didn't stop teaching But he did take a hiatus. And that might just be what you're in, too. You might be in a transitional phase. It might take a lot longer than people expect or want. You should be done with this. You should have been done with this 2 weeks ago, by golly. Why is it taking you 9 months? I don't know. 9 months? Yeah, it might be 9 years, man. It might be 90. It might be the end of your days. So embrace personal transformation. And embrace also the side effects of that, which could be doubt. Doubt is a hindrance. Like, I don't know what the heck I'm doing. And apparently everyone around me hates my guts for doing it. Or don't understand me. Or they think they're in some type of competition with me because they're crap temporaries. And that's what crap temporaries do. Let's revert back to the life of the Buddha. That's what his austere friends thought of him when he took the middle path. He was like, oh, this dude, he's a wimp. Gave up. Look at him. He's eating normal amounts of food every day. What a chump. I hope. Yeah, I could do a new film of the Buddha. It really shines the wonderful light on crap temporariness. But it's not meant to be easy here. There's nobody that says, hey, you know what you're doing. I mean, if they do, it's exceptional. And even if they do, I mean, it's nice, but they're not going to be solving any personal transformations for you, most likely. The best others can do is Dhamma talks. And it's either helpful or it's not helpful, and it could be a celestial roadmap, and you still might hear it, and it might not do anything for you at the wrong time in your personal journey, and it has nothing to do with the person who delivered it. But yeah, 40, 50 in this type of toxic environment. Although again, your environment might be very conducive. You might have just gravitated to a very chill place where people are not blaring out false histories and false narratives, a bunch of socio-cultural jamming. If not, great. That's not a problem. That's not a variable you're dealing with. But other people have been just run off a rail with this stuff. I think, yeah, work until you're 80. You gotta be kidding me. It's like somebody, even if you have like a Toyota 4x4 that other people have driven like 1,000,000 miles under these conditions, you're probably going to break an axle. Okay. That's coming from someone who, imagine somebody who's driven like 250,000 miles or something says that. Like, if he makes a decision for himself, I think that decision should be respected. It's not because he wouldn't want to necessarily do it. It's just under those conditions, it's just unbelievable. It's just not advisable. Superhuman or not. I mean, again, 250,000, you could be a pretty damn good driver and still make a call like that, even with equipment like that, if the conditions are the way they are. That's not to say they're going to remain that way. If it changes, you could change too. So that's another thing. Don't get committed to doomerism. Something changes, go with the positive change. Go with the positive flow. If it's not positive, then just endure the best you can. You might have been trained to have look for external validation. Well, now you need to change. It's got to change to internal validation. It's difficult. Yes, people are conditioned. Yes. All that Skinnerism is no joke. Yes, but it is possible. It's like you were driving uphill on the mountain, and now you've got to learn how to drive downhill with half broken brake and no gas. It's not nice. It's not optimal, but it is possible. And you don't have to drive like a maniac. You got no final destination other than death. So if you can coast a day or two and then maybe do some repairs a day or two, then that's okay too, isn't it? We're not comparing gallstones with a miserly gallbladder comparisons with other misguided materialists. That's not the competition that anyone needs to be in. So someone asked, can you say something about the economy? Thank you. Well, what does the economy devolve into under such hybrid conditions? Well, you have slave work for a slave class working for despots and their lickspittles and their monopolized legal cartel. So if you think you're going to get a fair shake in the courts on anything, you're taking a big risk, and it's most likely not going to pay off. That's what happens. That's why these systems go down the shitter, but it's just the cost of doing business for despots. They know that. What do you think? They can't pay some scientists to let them know, well, why aren't people even doing anything remotely as good as they did just 10 years ago? Why do we have a 30% decline in tax revenues? You don't think they notice that? They absolutely do notice that. But then they let themselves be persuaded with a couple of different arguments like, oh, well, the technology's changed, and so blah, blah, blah. Whatever, go back to bongoism. Isn't 100 trillion enough for you? Go back to sleep. Like if they need a 700-page accounting report typed up for them because they demand to know, well, then they will get it, won't they? That despotic class will get what they want. They get what they pay for. But of course, some of them know the real story, and then they look at that Zero F's watch, or they just don't care. Or maybe they'll do a couple of things for appearances. Maybe they'll found a charity or something for orphan children, you know. We know how big-hearted these despots are. Take a couple of pictures with some kids without dads that have been hybridized out of sociology into chicken coopism with the political component now. That's the other thing. So back when you had Rome, you had despots too. In fact, I mentioned Seneca's pupil. It was Nero, of course. You see, Nero's mother was a real piece of work, and she was so clever that she decided to have her son be a puppet while she made the really tough decisions, like making sure that he sent the military to put down an uprising associated with the execution of 400 slaves, because that was the law in Rome, that if someone in a household murdered one of the patrician class, and I believe it was a senator in this case, then every single last one of his slaves would be put to death. And that was supposed to be a measure to, a chilling measure to ensure that other despots like the good old senator didn't get murdered themselves. And so, you know, Nero's mother, she was really convinced of that logic, and so she had him deploy the military to prevent people from stopping the execution of 400 innocent people, essentially. So it doesn't really matter how much Seneca had an influence on him, does it? If he ended up getting involved with people like his mother that also adopted the philosophy, or not so philosophic philosophy, of murdering oppositional or people in the opposition. She also had a Roman senator murdered. But she wasn't put to death. Well, not immediately. But she made sure those 400 slaves, remember, these are people that the Romans overran in some place, in some far-flung part of their empire. And then, only the best made it to their palatial estates. They did some sorting. They didn't take the fat ones or the crippled ones or the ones that talk back too much. So yeah, being a despot, being in a despotic class, that is a lot of times has such massive negative karma associated with it. You think you're jealous of that? Why would you be jealous of what they have if that's what they have to do to keep it? And there's a great find, an archaeological find of Nero dressed up as a pharaoh, and just look at his fat, chubby face. He was just a stooge, essentially. But he was the emperor of Rome, by golly. Better not make him mad. And what did he get to do? Yeah, I guess he got to have his way with prostitutes and men, and live large. Aren't there people in the criminal class that live that way too? But I have to say, the most despicable part of the hybrid component, see, and this is where we come back to the analogy between Rome and today, they did not have a political component. They did not have political minders. I call them political operatives in disguise, because they have been trained to be very nicey nice and in your face and to get up in your business, and then they profile you or start covert attacks or undermine you or get the popo on you or get a mob against you because you might have said one or two things that you thought was in private that they misconstrue to a hateful network of people who are operating that way in disguise. The hybrid war, that works too extreme. Oh, is it? I think that's pretty warlike. It's pretty dastardly and low, and the consequences are pretty real and have been to a genocidal extent demographically now in the West. We can classify the results of the undeclared hybrid war that has an informational component to it, or should I say disinformational, utopianistic, gaslighting component to it, that it has reached genocidal levels. You take the population distributions in small towns across the United States as an example. You can't attribute to that, blah, 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 blah. Oh, yes, you can. When people are doing great sociologically, they're expansive. When they get the kibosh put on them, they shrink. Is that rocket science? Well, believe you me, the MF and experts that are the so-called experts during an undeclared hybrid war, they dispute that. Like the Pravda people in the Pravda information outfit during Soviet times. They disputed all different types of things, didn't they? How about they disputed that Chernobyl even happened? So, are you in the despotic class? Well, then you might have a reason for going along with that. But if you think dying from radiation slowly is a bad thing, then you might want to know the real information that might also be a little bit disparaging as far as the despotic class goes. Like, gross mass incompetence and lying on a gigantic scale, you think that's beneath them? That's standard operating procedure. So who's the paranoid fantasy person, as they would have you think someone like me is, versus what they do day in and day out 24/7 and is absolutely verifiable? Well, who verified it? Well, it wasn't their people. So what do we have? We have money people, people in it for the money. That's what Prigozhinism essentially is. Anybody can get paid and become a corporate robot and play the political game. Because remember, no matter what you do, you could be the most talented engineer the world has ever seen. If you're not politically on board with despotism or the modern equivalent of it, or their hybrid war operatives and operations, you're a bad person and dangerous to them, and they can very well do without your services. Thank you very much. You will be socially pariahified and economically blacklisted. What? I thought that the bad people did that to them 100 years ago. No, well, no, that's what they do today. And they do it to good people. And they're the bad people. Isn't that strange? When you stop standing on your hands, you start walking on your own 2 feet, that's what you're looking at. The nicely nice bad people with international crime affiliations that would make Stalin cry, that have been committing and have committed a massive genocide in Western civilizations over the last, I don't know, several decades. Sound pretty horrible and terrifying to you? Well, a lot of people, what they do is they stick their head in the sand or their fingers in their ears and start going la 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 la. Are you one of those? Well, that's bad karma. Okay? That doesn't mean it's great karma knowing the truth either, but my God, when you're dealing with radioactivity and you start developing symptoms, it's really the radioactivity and not because you're a bad person or you just weren't good enough or tough enough or people didn't like you enough. Like Stuart Smalley had people, how he clowned people that were trying to deal with, toxic sociological issues that were and are off the charts that they deny in a gaslighting. And again, deny, attack, and flip kind of methodology. So, yeah, political operators in disguise in a social milieu that deny that they are that. Well, that's really nicety nice. That's a nice component in the workplace, in the universities, in social venues, with or without international affiliations. Does that sound horrible to you? Does that sound worse than East Germany? Well, it sort of is. So what about the economy again? Yeah, as long as you are a total robot and sell out, you can be employed in the slave class. Now, let's not forget, slaves, they're not just poor slaves. You got rich, fancy slaves. Right? Just like the slaves working for the senators, they were fancy slaves versus the other slaves that were working for plebeians. And there weren't too many of those, because really the difference was arbitrary. You want to get into classes and class distinctions, those get sort of blurred in a gray zone, like social definition and social this or that. I'm pretty sure there were heroes of the Roman legion that were living way worse than fancy slaves were, for political reasons. Can you imagine what he thought about the empire versus a fancy slave? So you can see that dynamic today. They pick a fancy slave from some far-flung place. They're on board, aren't they? They feel themselves to be quite as good or better than the not so happy people whose reasons are considered questionable for not being overly enthusiastic about how the despotic class values certain citizens versus other ones, how they run the politics versus how it should or was meant to be run. The difference between reality and theory there, huh? Just like today. What? What are you saying? They're just like in Mexico, a cartel, progonists. But they're really disarming. They like to, get into any little group they can and then flip the narrative, impose chicken coop rules on the chicken heads. That would be beneath them, you think? Look at their newspapers. Look at The Guardian. These are smart morons. But that's where they get their poidism, their marching orders. Like, that's what people should think. That's what people should say. And it is intentionally radical and flip because it's a hybrid war crime, criminal type of method. That's what it is. It's intentionally extreme. Because the more extreme it is, they feel the more double plus safe they are from anyone that would be close to the classes that would disparage them for legitimate reasons. And it's really the legitimacy that forces them to censor things, doesn't it? They don't censor lies that are in their political interests. No. But they do employ teams of professionals to dispute the truth if it doesn't suit them. And then they place them in those information networks that are run by them. They have their little trained poids running around screaming that the sky is falling if any little factoid that blows them up makes it into distribution. You think that's too far-fetched? Under what type of rock have you been living under? Oh, I just went to university, got my first job, and now what do I gotta say? Is that where you are at mentally? Because if you got beyond that, they have no use for you. In fact, they would prefer that you starved and died miserably in the gutter, because that proves that you were just, wrong on all the issues, doesn't it? Finally, who listens to what losers have to say? There we come back to the luxury class conceit. And again, look it up, people. Luxury class beliefs. These are the beliefs that the fancy slaves are supposed to have, that the despotic class has foisted off on them and us. And they do believe it, and even if they don't, they pretend to, or use it as a hybrid war measure against normal, upstanding, good people. They have by the millions. So you don't think that's a crime? That could be classified as a sociological war crime, and SWC, something that during a genocidal hybrid war is something that one can very easily talk about, because that is what the data suggests. That's something somebody in the despotic class, the progoniist class, doesn't want you to know about or think about, but I would say that's possible. Se poso. Oh, of course it is. So we have a tank of fish that up until, let's say, 1950 had this type of fish in it. They were this type of healthy. And there was this number in it, in this same place, in this same operation. And now there's toxic waste in the tank, and 3 of those fish, and the rest of them are some type of parasitical or defunct species. What happened? Was it an act of God, or was it maybe the management of the fish tank and the environmental variables in that fish tank? Yes or no? Are you a scientist? You a sect boozist? You only believe in science, you don't believe in God? Okay. Fine, let's take you on your argument. What do you say then? Let's listen, let's read that report, and I'm willing to bet it is just 100% disinformation. But what will they pull? Well, I'm an expert. I'm a person that has been accredited. I am affiliated with some type of establishment that gives me credibility. And your report, your scientific, internationally could be peer-reviewed kind of report, that's hateful. It's very hateful. And that shouldn't be sent anywhere. And if that was published in a book, that should be pulled off the shelves. And if it costs $50, it should now cost $1,500 or $10,500, because that's hateful. Oh, and was that person working at this university? Well, make sure that they get some type of charge, or who knows what else. That's what's in play, people. So, look, I get the despot slave thing, although I'm not on board with the 95-5 distribution. I realize slavery is a part of civilization to a certain extent. Now, you can overblow that word. What is a slave, right? People get really worked up about it. Especially when I talk about white slavery, which is massively misunderstood or considered not to exist, when it's probably the biggest form at this time, at least in the modern version of it. Times change, but the concept really doesn't. So technically, yeah, they are slaves. And very mistreated ones at this time, because I guess Sino-Soviets don't really care, or they're a broker class in what they consider to be a genocidal war anyway. So why wouldn't they launch a hybrid one when they have? And they had the motive and the means and the funds and the brokers to do it. So don't forget, people were like, oh, well, you were harping on Kissinger too much last time. Remember, that was the guy that was negotiating with the Vietnamese in the Vietnam War, who were being supplied by the Chinese, just like the North Koreans were supplied by the Chinese. But that's the guy they want to find another one off. So what does that mean about his career, or the people that he placed or praised, the people who praised him during his lifetime? What does that say about them? Just give yourself 5 minutes. But let's not forget, there were 7 others. I mentioned Newsom, but the 2 other big ones, one was the head of BlackRock, the other was Goldman Sachs. There you go. Hilarious. So both of those companies, you have any money in them, pull them out. You could pass a bill tomorrow making those companies that investigates both of those companies for national security reasons, just immediately. And I'm willing to bet they would find things that would make even Kissinger look like a beginner. Why hasn't that happened yet? Well, ask the despotic class. They're so smart, aren't they? They're so rich that they tank the economy and put it in the hands of enemies. I don't know. Maybe they can figure this one out. Well, are they planning on retiring to Shanghai, or have they already? Why are they even in the West if they're just directing investments to places it should have never went in the first place? What, they're just continuing to shill for that? They're making money off that? Who else is making money off that? What, Xi Jinping's making money off that? That's who we're working for now? Says who? So these crap-eating robots, again, they only need 5% of fancy slaves, or 6. And yeah, they get them young, they screw them up, and then they toss them away. So I hope you screwball robots have a good retirement plan, that because at 30, 40 you usually get thrown out on your butt. And with all that bad karma you've accumulated, I would say the prospects aren't looking too good, especially because your psychology is screwed up. Being a hateful hybrid war operator doesn't really have benefits, even if they appear to be beneficial in the beginning. But coming back to the point, I always do like coming back to the point. The meta point is that real scientists, of which there are scientists of economics, and sociologists, like real ones that really do care about the people, not just professing to do that with a utopian cover like Poids do. They could absolutely ascertain these things, and they could reverse, just like cyanide in the water, reverse engineer the process, get it out of the water, shut down the pipes, shut down the industry, shut down everything to reestablish water quality. You can do the same thing in the economy, and in the sociology, and in the psychology, in the religion, in the culture. Oh yeah, you can. So that's where the big source of optimism for the future is, because just like when you get a bad diagnosis, that's just the beginning of the cure. But if people will be in denial, or like I said, be hateful war operators, which means they do like destroying the good thing. Just imagine a malign doctor. Yeah, he wants you to die. So he might not want you to die dramatically and fast, because that could make him look bad. But he might, just describe a slow thing or leave one or two things out. And that's why people get 3 different opinions, or at least they used to. Maybe today, because we got hybrid war and despotic genocidal schemes and plans in place, you might have to even change the country or the region, or go back in the stacks in the library to the Middle Ages to figure out what would be a better cure for social syphilis, if they claim that social syphilis is a good thing and you're crazy for thinking it isn't. Catch what I'm saying? Because that's what they do. I think it's called DARPA, their technique. Like deny, reverse, attack, flip. Forgetting what the other A is. But yeah, these are trained torpedoes. They are in sociology, they're in social engineering, they're in the economy. Just like 2 sets of books. You got the real one and you got the fake one. They're the fake set of books. And you see it on foreign policy too. How this, it came out and said, oh, these people railing against China, they're the problem. China's just, they're just going to continue to expand, and we should be all on board with that, because that's, lifting the most people out of poverty or something. Like, they just lame public relations, utopianistic, I'm bought out, I'm a shill type of presentation for how many suckers will believe it kind of operation. So you want to end up like that type of person? You want to be that type of person? I don't think so. I think the times are changing, and we'll get back to things that work, but you got to get rid of the people and the processes and the networks that wrecked it in the first place. And again, getting past denial is the first step. I don't have a smoking problem. The dude's smoking 3 packs a day. Dude, you have a smoking problem, right? You smoke 1 cigarette a day, fine. Okay? Some people say that's even healthy. 3 packs, no. It's just subjective. It's self-harming, and the worst part of it is denial, which is a subset of ignorance. You think you're doing something good for yourself, but you're not. You're overdoing it. That is not the middle path. So again, coming back to people, rich people these days under these conditions, with luxury beliefs, are those people that are needed in an economy or in politics or in a society? Ask yourself that. What did they do again? Is it good or is it bad? And if it's bad, what do you do about that? Those are the type of questions people need to start thinking about, because just thinking people are rich, that's it. How about the people managing the riches, these bankers, for example, that they're legitimate under conditions like this? You think so? Maybe they've delegitimized themselves as a class. How about that one? Can it happen? Self-selecting, delegitimization. Wouldn't that be also a subset of self-harm? But what if there's Stockholm Syndrome? Does that mean they should get away with it? Would that be right? It wouldn't. What do you do then? Start thinking about these problems, people, because they are complex. They're meant to be that. And if you don't get a grip on them, I mean, the end of the Roman Empire, that actually turned out better than people thought. This time, it's going to be looking a lot worse. It's going to be like the Uyghurs for non-Han Chinese. And this is the other thing. The Prigozhinists in Russia think they're, playing up 9D chess by working with the Chinese. They're right on their damn border, like a land border that's flat and ice cold. So would they be digging their own graves at this point? And Chinese selling them the shovels? Could that be what it is? Ever hear that old joke? Some people digging their own graves and other people selling them the shovels. Could it be? Is that what vanity and big-headedness and brutality can get you? How smart is their despotic class, really? Are they inventing new stuff? Or do they sort of look like Nero did when he was dressed up like the Pharaoh, just in modern day terms? But isn't that what all sort of, mafia-like, criminal-like classes look like in the end? With all their worldliness. Again, look at that stone. That stone is expensive. And also the details, can't pick that up at a supermarket. But what does it symbolize today? Look at old Nero's face. You want to be him? Go back and read some Seneca. Because contrary to his so-called fortunate pupil, his stuff is worth reading. But Nero's stuff, it does sort of look lame, doesn't it? It's like these monstrous fools do today. And then someone asked, well, do you think the word collaborator is too strong? And I thought about it. And actually, no, it's not strong enough. These people are genocidal, cultural war criminals. They destroy culture and they feel good about it. And how can they do that? Well, they're sadistic. How did they become sadistic? Well, each one of them has a different story. Sometimes it's Stockholm Syndrome. Like they get a gang to beat up on somebody, and then they tell them that it was their people's fault or their culture's fault. And now they need to be on board with that. Which is to say, these people have been seriously psychologically abused and given the wrong reasons for that by the abusing party. Is that pretty sick? Does that sound like something communists would do in a prison camp? Is that what they did? But now they're doing it in a civilian theater in colleges and universities and unity centers, like in Sweden, sport centers that all of a sudden are made up of a bunch of, well, Prigozhinist invaders. And then again, the class of collaborators that they create, political agitators. So historically, you could think of them like during the Spanish Civil War. You had workers that felt abused like that by the social hierarchy, and they were given a bunch of ideology and then sent torpedo-like against their own people. So Spanish Republicans, that's sort of the lineage of the terrorists in the West today. So you think that's a good thing? You think they should have won the Spanish Civil War? You are living in an alternative reality, or you're a sadist and you don't know how to stop being one? You're stuck as one in a group that has created that a reality around you, and you're a part of that. You're a collaborator in that. Well, you're not going to heaven, friend, that's for sure. And where you're living is already hell. So the worst you can do is to perpetuate that cycle. And that's what they would have you do. And it's usually the stupidest of young people, and then they usually off themselves. Like that's where a lot of these suicide statistics come from. Usually kill themselves by 30. But torpedoes aren't meant to have a long shelf life. So I get it. You've had terroristic atrocities committed against you. Well, what is the right thing to do? The right thing to do is to not perpetrate further atrocities, gain closure on what has actually happened to you, and stop the cycle of abuse. So don't attack other people. Don't try to get revenge, right? Just stop and heal. And maybe do a good deed every once in a while. And try to improve that karma. Because, like I said, Ansulimaga was a serial killer in the 5th century BC. Even tried to kill the Buddha, but stopped. And they say that he did not end up in hell. So redemption, repentance. Repentance means realizing you were doing something wrong and changing. That's what repentance is. It's not just saying, oh, forgive me. That's not enough. It has to be a real change, psychological and material, political, socio-politically, economically. Like I said, nobody needs to be rich in this dimension. A lot of people aren't. But attacking culture and other people and working for criminals, that was never a good idea. It's never meant to be a good idea. But some bad people cooked it up, and some bad people misdirected people, and this is what we have, which is imploding conditions, a despotic class, and poins, right? Political operators, or poigs. It's almost like pigs, right, with an O in there. In disguise. No, poids, like asteroids, poids, people, asteroids. Playing pretend for terroristic organizations. And again, some of them consider themselves to be reputable. They have a reputable reputation at this time, but that's eroding too, as are the morals and essentially anything they get their hands on. But if you consider that as a wartime activity, why wouldn't a nefarious other see that as a good thing? Well, yeah, let's just put some public relations on top of that. This utopianism. Someday it's all going to work. But until then, it won't. And if it blows up in the meantime and we take over the world, great for us, parentheses, right? Close parentheses, open parentheses, close parentheses. That's in the footnotes. A lot of people read right past that. But yeah, I get it. It's a cheap trick. Just think some kid in a bad neighborhood, hey, guess what? You know, your parents left you here and they were too stupid to take care of you. So now we're going to take care of you. And you know what? They were a bunch of a-holes. And so everybody liked them. And you see what I'm talking about? That's terrorism. That's criminality. So the Spanish Republicans and their lineage, right? That went all the way up to military conflict and got hundreds and hundreds of thousands of good people dead and psychologically screwed up. Still walking around today with t-shirts and meeting in groups and disputing that ever happened the way it actually did. Who was there? George Orwell was there. He knew what was happening. Oh, that guy, he just wrote some funny stories the left doesn't like told. They claim he's actually a leftist. Well, actually he was. He was for the working class, not the radical class. Surprise! But terrorists and criminals aren't for the working class, are they? They're for they themselves and whatever they can get away with. And that's basically a devilish class, isn't it? A bunch of retrobates and criminal class, terrorist class. They're powerful. They're powerful for how long? Nobody goes along with that strategy forever. It doesn't end well. Not in the lives to come, certainly, but also in this life. That's why people don't tend towards criminality. Naturally. And that's another thing that just confirms the principle that, yeah, having groups that don't have outgroups in them or class animosities are stronger groups than groups that allow those things to happen and don't get them under control. And not by going the radical leftist route, the utopianist route that doesn't work, but by going the practical route. Like, hey, this is our group. There's people like this in it, like us, and we take care of each other, and we don't let outsiders come in and screw things up. Or a group of insiders act like outsiders or collaborate with outsiders to cannibalize and parasitize and predate on the group. We don't let that happen. And when people snow us with PR saying that they're not doing that when they're doing that, we don't accept that either on face value or any other way. That people like that in the future will be identified as sociological war criminals and treated like war criminals, real ones. Look in a history book how you treat war criminals or how you treat real terrorists, not Osama bin Laden or whoever the hell they pulled out of a hat. Talking about real ones. Being in broad daylight ones. Clapping themselves with a group of other ones. Kind of ones. That's the ones you're looking at today. So, collaborator, is that too little? too much? Too much? Yeah, I'd say it's too little. Now, some people would say too little, too late. I don't see it that way. There's still millions of people out there that can change their ways. And even if 1 million people don't get roughshod run over them by people like that, that's where civilization will be. It doesn't matter where it is. So the sooner this thing gets turned around, the better. And this is just one little piece of that. Wake up, people. And put all that animosity away. And yet, on the other hand, putting an animosity away does not mean collaborating or buying into utopianism. So do make those really small, essential differences. Do take them seriously because they really are serious and they're two vastly different things. So if the Sophist Clown class jumps out and starts playing that song, that's what you're looking at, SWCs.